Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Nicky Stees is here. NFL Week 5 is complete, so you know what time it is. Roll it.
Fasten your
Let's go.
Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Stees! Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue, think they slate, dropping unrealistic mags, 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, flip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through the early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way, sports content for the reals that feels like day.
Good. All right, we're officially live now. Week 5 NFL recap with Nicky Stees. As for those coming in, if you haven't done so, make sure to like and subscribe to the Nicky Stees channel and the Hardcore Sports Network, where we get to do these streams on. So shout out to Hardcore Sports as well for this. If you haven't done so, make sure to like, subscribe to that and the Nicky Stees channel. Now, we're going to get into it. We're going to start off first with the breaking news that came out earlier today. Before we dive into the recaps of the games, we're going to start with that the New York Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh already early into his 4th season with the teams. Now, this really wasn't much of a surprise to me. We had kind of seen hints that this was coming after the Week 1 performance. People were starting to point the finger at the coaching and say they need to do something after that poor performance against the 49ers coaching-wise. In a game where, despite the fact that the Niners were rolling, the Jets made it competitive and gave it their best shot. And now we're through 5 weeks. The Jets are at 2-3. They've dropped 2 straight after a 2-1 start. That one of those 2 games beat Week 4 last week, a game against the Denver Broncos they were favorite to win, where they lost by 10-9. There are some hints that Rodgers and Saleh weren't exactly on the same page. Now, we don't know for sure what the case was, but there had been these hints dropped. And considering how much the Jets invested into getting Aaron Rodgers to make them contenders, if it's true that there was issues between the two of them, obviously we knew the Jets were going to side with Rodgers over the head coach. Now, this is just speculation, but things did seem rocky between them relationship-wise. But that wasn't the only issue with Saleh. The other issues was he had been through 3 seasons so far, did not amount to a winning record as a coach. And now going into year 4, we've seen some struggles early when they finally have the quarterback they're looking for. But to be fair, Rodgers does deserve some of the blame too. I'll get more into that in a minute. And then here we go. And we got Arku stopping by, Hardcore Sports Network content supporter. As always, thanks for stopping by. And he also points out they have Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator, the same guy who was a complete hack for the Denver Broncos as their head coach. And for Rodgers, and Arku saying he's not great, I'm assuming you're referring to Hackett on that one. But you can correct me in the chat if you're referring to someone else. Yeah, you also have Nathaniel Hackett too, who an offensive coordinator, not the most sound minds in the world. Obviously, the coaching staff on the Jets has been a problem, and they've taken the first step to address fixing that issue by removing the head coach. But now here's the thing: you still got the rest of the season. You're going the rest of the way with an interim coach. Now, to be fair, this division's still open. You have the Miami Dolphins are 2-3, Jets 2-3. Buffalo is up at 3-2, but Buffalo's dropped 2 straight, which I'll get more into later. But there's still a possibility the Jets could win this division and possibly get a home playoff game for the first time since 2002-2003 season. If they can turn the ship around and win enough games, especially those games against Buffalo. But the question is now, what does the Jets offense look like without the head coach? How will this team play now that the coach has been dismissed and they're moving on with the interim coach, who I still haven't heard if that's been announced. I'm going to look it up right now on Google and see if it's been declared, see if that's the case. Okay, so here, apparently it's official. The Jets have named, according to USA Today, Jets have named defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich had the interim head coach for the remainder of the season. So it's just in. Jeff Ulbrich will be the interim coach for the remainder of the season. So now the question is, what does it look like under Jeff Ulbrich? Now you're making that transition from a guy who's been a good defensive coordinator for them so far to interim head coach. Now, sometimes this can work out. Sometimes. Remember, it kind of helped the Raiders a little bit last year. Regular season so far, not as much with Antonio Pierce. But remember, 3 years ago with Rich Bisaccia, when he stepped up as the interim coach, the Raiders won enough games to sneak into the playoffs as a wild card. Got to wonder, could the Jets do the same here? But now, obviously, Robert Saleh, who was on the outs, it seemed like the relationship between him and the quarterback wasn't on good terms. The team wasn't winning. They never finished with a winning record. And here we are, year 4. They're 2-3. This time, Saleh finally has a quarterback, so he doesn't have that excuse anymore. And it's still looking like more of the same. So it's not hard to realize, he needed to go. The Jets decided to just get him out the way. And hopefully for them, things will work out in their favor. But while we're still on that subject, I'm going to skip ahead of the Thursday night game for a second and go about the Vikings and Jets game, since the Jets was on our mind. So as far as Saleh goes, last thing I'll say is, Jets did what they felt was right. Good luck to them the rest of the way with their defensive coordinator. But now for the Vikings, though, to give credit where credit's due, they did defeat the Jets in London 23-17. And what was a bit of a nail-biter, but hey, Vikings win, they're 5-0. I mean, you got Kevin O'Connell over there. He's certainly doing a good job with what he had. He got him to the number 2 seed a couple years ago, his rookie year. Even last year, he made them competitive without a real quarterback. And this year so far, they're 5-0 with Sam Darnold as their starter, filling in for J.J. McCarthy. Vikings are obviously doing good. And obviously, O'Connell's doing something right as the head coach, something the Jets could take note from. But, hey, the Vikings win this game. It was kind of ugly, but they found a way to win it. They managed to pick off Rodgers 3 times, make him tie a career high. You got Van Ginkel, had that pick 6 early, which was highlighted. And now, however, the thing was with Darnold, though, to be fair, he didn't have the best performance in this outing. He did have an INT, and he did have a fumble at some point. He kind of looked human. He looked a little more mortal, kind of like the Sam Darnold used to. Now, to be fair, this was against a good defense in the Jets. But I feel like with Sam Darnold, eventually you're going to see that ship. They're going to cool off a little bit, I think. They'll drop a few games in the coming weeks. I don't think they're going to completely miss the playoffs and collapse. They should at least be a playoff team, but we have seen this drill with the Vikings numerous times in the past where they'll be 5-0, 6-0 and miss the playoffs. So it could happen, but I do feel like the Vikings will eventually lose some games. Maybe a team like the Lions will beat them, or maybe the Packers in the rematch, and they'll probably drop a few games as the season goes along. But hey, they are undefeated. They're 5-0. They are likely to make the playoffs. But the point being is, if you actually look at Sam Darnold's performance in this game, it wasn't the strongest performance. And this is not to take away at all from the Vikings. They got a good team, and they're finding ways to win. They won, even though this wasn't their strongest game. They found a way to win. They picked off Rodgers 3 times. They did enough to contain the Jets to less points. And that's ultimately the name of the game, to score more points and to win. And the Minnesota Vikings did that again. And they remain undefeated overseas in London. That's another impressive feat for the Vikings, somewhat impressive feat. So salute to the Vikings there. And shout out to Coach O'Connell for getting that team going. So the Vikings are at 5-0. And then, let's see, we're going to look real quickly, going to pull up their schedule, see who they have next. Oh, and next they got the Lions October 20th. They got their bye week coming up. They get to rest and then get ready for Detroit. So that'll be a good game, October 20th. Vikings, Lions, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, week 7. Mark your calendars down if you're interested in that one. And speaking of interesting division rival games, we had on Thursday Night Football, the Atlanta Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a thriller. The Falcons beat the Bucs in OT with a walk-off touchdown. Cousins had a career high 500-plus passing yards. Thing is with Kirk Cousins, man, he still can ball sometimes. He knows how to sling the football around and can give you a few good performances from time to time. Now, the thing is with Cousins, the difference between him and the elite QBs is he's not consistent with it, but he can still give you a good performance from time to time and can play pretty solid with right pieces around him. And this point, the Falcons receivers, they were on point right here. Cousins hit 3 different receivers for a touchdown. Drake London had a monster game in this one, leading the Falcons to a victory over the Bucs in OT. And like I said, excellent. And there you got Arku. You like that? Yep, and we did get to hear that soundbite in the locker room afterward with the team. So I got another Kirk Cousins. You like that? Remember, the original came in Washington, his first full season as a starter, when he did the "You Like That" after a win over the Bucs in 2015. And now, here it goes again. And we got Chad stopping by. What's up, Nikki? Prayers go out to my aunt. That same one that had the husband had the brain tumor, aka uncle's passed away. Now, that's a sad story there, Chad. Sorry to hear that. I know it's not easy. We all struggle. We all deal with family loss at some point in our lives. So I know it can be hard to deal with, man. But hey, take all the time you need to grieve. Take all the time. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with grieving, man. Take the time you need to grieve. Sorry for your loss. And hope you feel better soon, man. But hey, prayers up to you and your family, Chad. And you got my cousin who's a Vikings fan, doesn't like Kirk, which that's understandable, man, because Cousins, man, he's the ultimate QB tease, man. Because he'll make it seem like you'll think he's going to do something great, but he just doesn't finish the job ultimately. You see what happens. But in this one, back to the game, the Falcons deserve credit, man. It was a good game, though, too. You had several lead changes that went back and forth. And the Bucs had a pretty solid performance. Baker stole a few touchdowns, and he looked solid even in defeat. So I'm not counting the Bucs out either just because they lost this one, because they still put up 30 and still had a solid performance. And they deserve props for that. So I don't think it's the end of the line for the Bucs. Now, for the Falcons, though, let's talk about them real quickly because we got to talk about it. We're looking at where the Falcons are at. They're 3-2. They're in first place in the NFC South by default on a tiebreaker with the Bucs because they just beat them. Now you're looking at they got the Panthers ahead for week 6. Then week 7, they got the Seahawks, which after the Seahawks lost to the Giants, that looks like that could be 2 winnable games. You could be talking up 5-2 Falcons at some point going into October 21st. So is there a possibility the Falcons could be the number 4 seed and host a home playoff game for the first time since their Super Bowl run in the 2016-17 season? You guys can comment in the chat. Let me know what you think. And it's funny because I talked about this at work with one of my buddies. He saw the Falcons schedule and he said, I think the Falcons could make the playoffs and win their division. They have a relatively easy schedule. And that certainly looks like it at this point. They did just beat the Bucs, who are the only real threat in the division at this point. So we could be seeing an Atlanta Falcons team hosting a home playoff game. But is this team Super Bowl contenders? Nah, I don't see it. I mean, they have playoff potential, yes. Super Bowl contenders, no. But hey, congrats to the Falcons, man. They're doing their thing. They have a solid defense. They have some weapons on offense. Kirk Cousins, say what you want to say, but he's better than Desmond Ritter. He at least gives this offense a chance. So shout out to the Falcons, man. You know, I think they're a team that could possibly be the division winner, man. So now for the Bucks, though, we'll take real quick, take a look at the Bucks schedule. They have the Saints coming up. That could be a win right there for them. But hey, shout out to the Falcons on a 3-2 start. We'll see where they go from here. And speaking of games, we had a good one over in Houston. We had the Houston Texans triumph over the Buffalo Bills to advance to 4-1. They started off the game red hot, but then they did nearly blow it. They let the Bills come back and make it a game, but they hold on to the lead. There were a few struggles there in the second half. CJ Stroud didn't have the strongest half, but the team still finished with a win. They did what they needed to. Even D'Amico Ryans alluded to the idea that, hey, it's not always going to be a good, pretty win. It can sometimes be ugly, but a win's a win. Now, that's not the exact quote he said, but he did say something along those lines. I apologize if you were looking for the exact quote, but hey, shout out to the Texans. They deserve props. You see CJ Stroud now. He's building off that momentum from last season. It's crazy. I'll get to your set comment in a second there, Arku. I'm not ignoring you. And that's crazy. Some people were saying that CJ's having a sophomore slump because the stats aren't the same. But here's the thing, man. It's not about the stats. It's not always about statistically topping your previous season. It's about winning games. And this year, the Texans are winning games. They're 4-1, and they're looking like they're in cruise control of their division. That's the thing that matters most. And now for the Buffalo Bills, it's interesting. You started off 3-0. You lost back-to-back games. But the thing is, with the Bills, you start off 3-0. You beat the Arizona Cardinals, who are below average to below average team so far. Then you beat the Dolphins, who have been struggling in that infamous Tua concussion game, which creates a lot of long-term concerns for him. And then the other win was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just won their first game. But then they stepped up in competition against the Ravens and Texans, two of the contenders in the AFC, and lost both those matchups. And Josh Allen was 9 for 30 in that. As Arku alluded to, is that the Sean McDermott chaos? It's looking like it right now. You started off the season hot, then you cooled off once you played the tough teams. And now the Bills are starting to look like what we thought they might be, a potential 8-9 win average to maybe above average team. And things are starting to look that way for the Bills. As I alluded to after talking about the Jets, that AFC East is still open. So there's obviously some red flags for Buffalo there. They don't have the same level of talent. They had to step up and play tougher teams. They didn't do so well. Like I said, Allen struggled. He was only 9 for 30 passing. He did not have a good performance in this one overall. I mean, the Bills tried to come back and make it close, but they just couldn't get the job done. Now that raises questions for their future. Because for Buffalo, you had the Jets on Monday night. That looks like it could be a toss-up possibly. And then you got the week 7. You got the Titans. That could be a win. Week 8 Seahawks. Week 9, you got the Dolphins. Week 10, the Colts. I mean, some of those games are winnable, but it's kind of looking like this could be an 8-9 win Bills team. And for the Houston Texans, they're looking like a legit team now. CJ Stroud's got a year of experience under his belt. He's got a better all-around team around him. You got Stephon Diggs. You still got Dameon Pierce, a solid second option. Joe Mixon comes back and he's ready. Oh, he could be a force in that offense. And you got D'Amico Ryans, who's done an excellent job as coach so far. Watch out for the Texans. And speaking of AFC teams that are dominant, switching gears, we had ourselves a hell of a game, too, between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals in overtime. For the Ravens, they've won 3 straight after an 0-2 start. The Bengals are 1-4. Odds of them coming back and making the playoffs are low right now. But for the Ravens, you've won 3 straight. They were hyped up to be contenders headed into the season. I mean, it took a minute for them to get going, but now they're in a rhythm. And Derrick Henry had himself a solid game. He didn't have a great game, but he had a respectable game. And the Ravens, credit to them, they played resilient as a team. They were down by 10 points on 3 different occasions, but they did not quit. They competed. They stayed in the game. Zay Flowers had himself a solid game on 7 receptions. And then Justin Tucker made the 2 clutch field goals, one to tie late, the other in overtime for the win. So Justin Tucker, clutch as always for the Ravens. But shout out to them. That's a good team win against the division rival that came to play. That finally tried to live up to their expectations. So it gives credit to the Ravens. Shout out to you guys. They did their thing. They won 3 straight. They overcame a tough situation. Lamar Jackson had himself a solid game again. But even the Bengals, too. Offensively, they showed up. Chase has showed up as well. Joe Burrow played a good game in defeat. And the Bengals, it looks like, they still have a shot at being competitive and winning some games. Now, as far as playoffs go, at 1-4, it looks it's a long shot. And that's the worst part for the Bengals. Now you're 1-4. You drop that game to the Patriots week 1, which is the only win they've had thus far this season. And then you lost to KC. Then you came back week 3 and dropped one to Washington. It's not looking good for the Bengals. You got to wonder about Zach Taylor's future as head coach. Is he on the hot seat next? Is he next to Fal Saleh? I think there's a good possibility of it because Burrow had himself a really good game, but was all for naught. Now you're 1-4 with a long shot at making the playoffs if you're the Bengals. And from here, you still got your division still. You got the Steelers, even though they dropped 2 straight, they could still win on them at any point. The Browns are looking like the Browns were used to. But the Bengals, you still got teams like the Chargers. If they can get healthy, that could be a tough test for them. They got to play the Ravens again. You still got to play Pittsburgh, who could still win some games against them. The Browns, with the QB situation with Watson playing horrible, that looks winnable. The Bengals, they look like they could. I think they could win some games, but they'll probably rally to like a 7 or 8 win season the way things are going. And they do have the Giants this week. That should be a win on prime time. And then you got the Browns after that. That should be a win. There's 2 winnable games there for the Bengals, but overall, it's not looking good for them. But hey, shout out to the Ravens. They did their thing. They got the W, much needed win to step up to 3-2 and be tied with the Steelers for first place. Because now they got a tough matchup against the Commanders on 1 p.m. And speaking of the Commanders, real quickly, shout out to the Washington Commanders who dismantled an AFC North team in the Cleveland Browns. It's a nice game. You had a monster game from Daniels, both the pass and the run game. You had a run game combined for like 202 yards between the trio of Jaden Daniels, Austin Eckler, and McNichols. A nice performance there by the run game. We saw that big run from Eckler. And Washington's just looking like a real deal team in the NFC. If Jaden Daniels, barring any serious injuries, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And Washington, now look how it is under new management. You don't have Dan Snyder trying to throw money at the big names that'll give him publicity like washed up Dion, on the downswing McNabb, Adam Archuleta, Antoine Randall. You don't have that anymore. Now you got a team that's actually trying to build up properly, getting behind a young quarterback. He's got weapons to work with. You got Terry McLaurin. You got a good run game for him to work with. You still got not Zach Ertz at tight end. He's not the same player he was for the Eagles, but he's still a solid option in the passing game. And with Ertz, he brings that veteran leadership characteristics that you want from a player to the locker room. So overall, the Washington's done a solid job now. Building a team around Jaden Daniels, finding that right QB. You don't have Snyder's fingerprints and everything. Good job by Washington going 4-1. Shout out to Jaden Daniels. So far, rookie of the year, and if things keep up, potential MVP candidate. I'll talk more about MVP candidates once we get to December. I'm not going to talk about early MVP candidates if that's what you were looking for. I decide I'm going to wait till we get closer to December so I don't jinx it. But hey, nice win by Washington. Great job so far by Jaden Daniels, making this team look like a legit contender. Now they got Baltimore. I'm looking forward to that game, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. And now we got Arku. You guys better beat the Browns now. Oh, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, the Browns are toast. This is going back to the butt trash years of the Browns throughout the 2000s and most of the 2010s. Yeah, we better beat that team. And Watson, man, yeah, that contract's looking more and more embarrassing as the minute goes, as the weeks go. If the rest of the division beat them, yep. Oh, yeah, you're right. Cowboys week 1, Giants week 3, Washington now. Absolutely, the Eagles better win that game, which I'll get to that more later this week for a live stream on Friday. So there's a preview right there, Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be going Eagles versus Browns week 6 preview. So tune in for that on Friday. I'll remind you guys that via Twitter and YouTube. But moving right along, switching gears, we're going to talk about the 49ers. This team, sometimes in football, you'll start to realize how valuable a player is once they're not there. And for the 49ers, no Christian McCaffrey, you see this team looks a lot different without Run CMC in that offense. Because, I mean, granted, to be fair, though, the Niners, they've tried their best with what they have, but they're just not the same without McCaffrey falling to 2 and 3. I mean, granted, Jordan Mason's done a solid job running the ball, but here's the biggest difference. McCaffrey was a versatile player that could also make an impact in the passing game, too, with screen passes and short yardage passing. That could, not just his running, whereas Jordan Mason doesn't have that same elusiveness to be a legit threat in the passing game the way McCaffrey was. And you see the difference there. Granted, to be fair, the Niners are trying their best, but they're still losing games. They've 2 and 3. They blew a 10-point lead against the Cardinals and let the Cardinals come back. And you had Purdy's looking more mortal now, looking like a late round draft pick now. He had 2 interceptions in this game, but only 1 touchdown. And obviously, just this team does not look the same without Christian McCaffrey, man. And to be fair, they've tried their best to make it work, man, but injuries have hit them hard. I mean, you had Fred Warner, he got injured in the win against the Patriots. I mean, granted, George Kittle, you know, he did go out there and give it his best. I mean, Fred Warner looked like he was in that game too, I believe, right? But it just wasn't enough for them. I mean, he did get 12 tackles, credit to Fred Warner, but it just wasn't enough for the team to win that game. And for the Niners, man, it's just, not the same without McCaffrey. I mean, I give them credit. They're trying their best, but Brock Purdy, he's not looking like a Patrick Mahomes without Deebo Samuel, who did play for the first time in a few weeks, but was minimum in this game. His impact he had no impact on this game. He only had 1 reception. He didn't feel like a factor at all. If you didn't watch the game at all, you may have thought Deebo was still out because he barely made an impact for the team in this game. But to be fair, he was missing off a couple weeks, though. But the point being is, though, they just don't look the same without their weapons being a factor. You had 1 in Deebo, non-factor. McCaffrey out, and Kittle. He went out there and tried his best, but just wasn't enough, man. And for the 49ers, tough loss to the Cardinals. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the same time, got to give credit to the Cardinals, too. They did come back. They didn't give up. They did what they needed to take the lead and get that narrow win. But to be fair, this is more about the 49ers than it does the Cardinals, because you're talking about a Cardinals team that's struggling. They couldn't close out Buffalo, who's still a decent team, all things considered. And they barely escaped with the win against the Niners, but it said more about the Niners shooting themselves in the foot than it did the Cardinals winning. Same Cardinals that got destroyed by the Commanders. The Cardinals that beat a 1-4 Rams team that is off to their worst start since the St. Louis days in since their first year back in LA in 2016. So with all due respect to the Cardinals, even though Kyler Murray's still a solid QB, they're not the best team in the world. And the 49ers dropped to this team. I think it says more about the Niners, who we saw as a Super Bowl contender, than it does the Cardinals. But to be fair, the Niners still have time to turn it around, possibly still win that division, make a playoff run. And the division's still open too. Seahawks are 3-2, and they dropped the game to the Giants, which is set confidence at a low for them. But for the Niners, they'll have to find a way to turn this thing around, and we'll see what they do from here. Now, to be fair, it's only 5 weeks. We've seen midseason turnarounds plenty of times, and we've seen midseason collapses plenty of times. So it's not over for the Niners yet, but it's not looking the same so far without McCaffrey. I mean, for them, hopefully they'll find their rhythm. They'll make adjustments. Maybe they'll make a trade around the trade deadline, because we know trade deadlines have been more active for the NFL in the past couple of years. But we got to see where the Niners go from here. But it is a tough loss for them. For their sake, you're hoping they bounce back. They do have the Seahawks Thursday night. There's an opportunity to bounce back. Like I said, Seahawks are at a low after losing to the Giants. See where they go from there. And for the Cardinals, hey, congrats on the win. You got the win. There's still hope for them, but I'm not sure how far they're going to go. They still got to play the Packers from here. Then you're talking about the Chargers, who could start to get healthy by then, maybe. And then you got the Dolphins. You have the Bears. Those could be winnable games, but I think Cardinals are kind of like a 7-8 win team. 49ers should be doing better than they are, but we'll see what they do to adjust from here. One thing's for sure, they're not the same without McCaffrey. They need to do something. Moving on, now we're going to talk about the Cowboys and Steelers. Hey, man, Dallas Cowboys, man, Steelers, it wasn't a typical low-scoring game. And now credit to the Cowboys for winning, but at the same time, to the Cowboys, the way I've seen them play this year, I see them as an 8-9 win team. And the way Washington's looking, it looks like they'll probably win the division. Cowboys at 8 or 9 wins. Maybe that could be a 7 seed. Maybe if it's 9 wins, that could be enough to at least get a playoff game. But they're not looking like the same regular season team we've seen the last 3 seasons. Because say what we want to say about the playoff performances last 3 seasons, but they did have 3 good back-to-back regular seasons, 2 of those 3 being division titles in a home playoff game. Cowboys now, even despite having a winning record, aren't looking the same. They're looking like an 8-9 win team to me. Because while the Cowboys did win, to their credit, I'll tell you this was the best Cowboys win I've seen in a while of what they've dealt with. Right, and we got to factor in. Shout out to our coup for bringing up that point. Because we have to remember, they were down DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, and they still found a way to win on the road as underdogs. So I got to give them that. They did find a way to win. They are 3-2. But at the same time, on one hand, they are 3-2. So I do think they can still find ways to win games. But at the same time, you still saw offensively it wasn't their best performance. Dak threw 2 picks in the game. Now, they did go with the touchdown drive at their end, to give them credit. I just see like the Cowboys, the way they played, it was kind of like first, it was the Giants game, a game that they should have won more handily and impressively. They've narrowly won. And now against the Steelers, to their credit, they won. It's like Cowboys, I'm getting mixed signals from this team so far based off the way they played. They dominated the Browns, which based off the way the Browns look, that's what you should do. They struggled against the Saints. They struggled against the Giants. They did win, but they struggled. I mean, I saw the Ravens beat them up most of the game. Now the Ravens are looking like a good team and the contender in the AFC. I just get mixed signals from the Cowboys. I feel like they're a subpar team. And same goes with the Steelers. Now, for the Cowboys, I do wanted to point out, shout out to Rico Dowdle on the running game. He had 20 carries for a respectable 81 yards. Respectable performance by it. No, it was actually 87. Yeah, respectable performance. But the question is now at the running back, now he's getting more carries. Does Dowdle end up being like another Tony Pollard? Or does he maybe get a little more experience and maybe have a breakout year out of nowhere? That's the thing that remains in we're seeing. We got Pele. The Pele Parlay podcast. Cowboys may sneak in to the 7th seed wild card, but that's it. All right. And Pele, shout out to you for that comment. You're confirming the same thing. You're pretty much saying the same thing I was saying, that I was saying possibly 8 to 9 win season, maybe the 7th seed, and Pele Parlay podcast flat out said 7th seed. So he's validating my point that I just see this team as a average to maybe above average team. And the Steelers, I see the same thing with them. And Justin Fields, he had a decent performance in this game despite the team losing. And it's crazy because the defense played good. However, I feel like the Steelers, if you just get a wide receiver or two that can actually help break the game open, you get a better running back than Najee Harris that can run better, then you have a solid offense that can win more than 8 to 10 wins a season. And now the Steelers have lost 2. You're kind of like, here we go again. Steelers looking like possibly another year as the 7th seed. So it's just interesting. And the Steelers could be starting Russ. Right, now that he's back, they might want to make the change to Russell Wilson again. But that's another subject for another time. We'll see what the reports are, and we'll see what the Steelers do from there. But now they got a QB controversy. Do they stick with Justin Fields, or do they go to Russell Wilson? That'll give us something to talk about, and keep an eye out for the news now for the Steelers. Got a QB controversy going. And we're going to close, and now we closed out the weeks with Monday Night Football. Kansas City Chiefs remain undefeated, defeating the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football. It's another one of those games, kind of similar to the Chargers game, where it wasn't the prettiest win, but a win's a win. Their defense grinded it out there. You had Chris Jones, it's solid performance. They could put pressure on Derek Carr all night. Now, Carr did leave with a hip injury. I haven't seen an update on him yet, but I'll keep an eye out for an update to see what the status of Derek Carr is, but hopefully he'll be okay. The Saints, even though he's not the best option in the world, he's the only option at quarterback they have right now. So they got to hope he's okay. And for the Saints now, it's been a hard crash back down to reality. All I can say is they're kind of what we thought we were. Mediocre team. Dennis Allen does not look like he's the answer at head coach. But for Kansas City, man, congratulations to them. And, Travis Kelce, showing why he's the top tight end in the NFL currently, finally had himself that great performance. And shout out to Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt getting his redemption story with Kansas City after he got himself kicked off the team for that incident back in 2018. He had 27 carries for 102 yards. Kareem Hunt showing he can still be a valuable back in the league. Even if he's mainly going to be used as a number 2 guy or the free agent guy you sign when you need a back, Kareem Hunt showing he can still be a value. He helped run the ball for this team. So I got to say, the offensive MVPs for this game, so give credit. You had Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt, and Juju Smith-Schuster. 7 receptions for 130 yards. Juju playing up to his potential there with Mahomes. Juju Smith-Schuster on the comeback for this one game. But shout out to Kansas City. You won the game. That's what matters most. Hey, love them or hate them, that team's finding ways to win. They got a good defense. Chris Jones wrecking havoc. Offense still doing enough to win games. I mean, Mahomes has thrown some picks, but he still makes enough plays for him to find ways to win. And Kareem Hunt, good performance from him. But that's what happens when you have a really talented team around you. And when you're a quarterback the caliber of Patrick Mahomes, you can make your mistakes, but he's also one of those quarterbacks that will always make up for those mistakes and find ways to get your team to win. So shout out to Patrick Mahomes, man. And before we get going, now it's time for the 2-minute recap. In this section, I do this like I always do. We just quickly go through 2 minutes, give them quick thoughts on some of the other games that happen here before I head on out. We got a few more seconds. We're going to do the 2-minute recap. We're going to talk a little bit about the Seahawks blowing it against the Giants, falling to 3-2, embarrassing loss. Broncos beating the Raiders. We'll also acknowledge and give a shout out to Caleb Williams. Do that quickly, the 2-minute recap. in about 4 more seconds. It's a 2-minute recap. Let it begin. Let's talk about the other games. First, we had the Green Bay Packers found a way to get the win against the Rams on the road. Jordan Love did have an ugly interception early on where he should have threw the ball out of bounds when he was about to get sacked in his own end zone, and it led to a pick six, but the Packers find a way to win. The defense comes through with a clutch stop, a clutch 4th down stop, so shout out to the Packers there for the win. You did enough. You're up to 3-2. You need every win you can get in a tough division, so good job there for the Packers. And for the Bears, interesting. You had Caleb Williams had himself a good game. It was against the Panthers, mind you. But this was the perfect game. And this was the game that Caleb Williams needed. He needed a game in a favorable situation where he could perform well, get the confidence rolling, and that's what he did. He hooked up with DJ Moore for a few touchdowns. DJ Moore had himself a nice game. Things are looking up for the Bears so far. Hey, take the wins you can get them. Jaguars, man, beat the Seahawks. No, Jaguars beat the Colts. The Colts, man, things did not look well. But to the Colts' credit, they had an unlikely hero. Alec Pierce had 2 key receptions, one of them for a touchdown to get the Colts back into the game, give them a chance. We'll have to see what he does from there. He could be a legit option for them there, but you saw throughout most of the game, they missed the presence of Jonathan Taylor for sure. Colts got to get back on track. It says more about them they lost than it does the Jags. Jags barely won. And then the Seahawks, man, what happened against the Giants? This was a game they should have won. They're 3-1. On paper, you're the far superior team, but you didn't get the job done. You wet the bed. Now the Seahawks are coming crashing down to what I thought they'd be, a mediocre team. I just feel like Seahawks, man, they're kind of stuck with mediocrity. Giants, hey, take the win. Congrats to you guys. 2-3 looks better than 1-4. So to everyone that tuned in, before I go off, I want to thank everyone for tuning in as always. Thanks for your support. If you haven't done so, make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this at Week 5 recap. As always, it will be going up on Spotify, but this time around, since Hardcore Sports Network doesn't have a Spotify page that they're currently using, Mitch has decided to take a step back from uploading on Spotify. I will be creating my own Spotify and uploading my streams. I'm actually going to learn how to do so from Mitch at 2 p.m. So shout out to Mitch for showing me the ropes. But the point being, though, I got 18 minutes, so I got to get going before I get to that. But I will be uploading it on Spotify. For those of you guys that follow me on Twitter, I will share the link to this Week 5 recap on Spotify when I get it uploaded. If you guys are coming through and you want to follow me on Twitter and you haven't done so, I will put the link to it in the chat. There's a link to my Twitter to follow me, follow my tweets. I share my YouTube shorts, my live streams, sometimes do some polls. So check me out on Twitter if you haven't done so. So shout out, of course, to Arku, Pele Parlay Podcast, everyone that listened. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a great rest of your day and night. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, basketball fans, be live for episode 92 of the Pick and Roll Podcast. You can catch me on that. Catch me Friday doing the Eagles versus Browns preview, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's what's coming up for live streams. So again, as always, thanks for coming in. I greatly appreciate your support. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Until next time, your boy Nicky Stees signing out.